Welcome to the podcast where motherhood meets reinvention. I'm your host, Sharon Macey, and this is Mom to More. I'll be speaking with remarkable moms who have embraced the art of transformation, crafting their more by leveraging the skills they hone as stay-at-home moms. They'll share their experiences, struggles, and successes as they return to a former career, pursued a passion or hobby, or charted an entirely new path, giving you the clarity, motivation, and inspiration to help you answer the question, what do you want to do when your kids grow up? Hello, Pod Moms. Welcome back to Mom to More. Well, I am very excited to welcome today's guest, Makensi Gage. Let me tell you a little about her. As a recovering people pleaser, and after years of being the yes girl, Makensi is learning that doing it all is a little overrated. Focusing on her personal growth doesn't come easy, and yes, she complains, don't we all? In her life, the laundry piles up, the toilets aren't always clean, her kids fight, and dinner is rarely homemade. In her book, It's a No from Me, A People Pleaser's Guide to Freedom-ish, Makensi identifies the obstacles that many of us are faced with just because we are women, which she believes also comes with so many unrealistic standards. She shares her peaks and valleys, lots of life experiences, many lessons learned, and embarrassing moments that will make you laugh out loud. She's navigating the exhausting job of being a wife and mom of 3, all while trying to find herself. What seemed impossible suddenly feels within reach after utilizing the freedom of saying no. Well, amen to that, and welcome, Makensi. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm so glad you're here.
Of course.
So there are so many things that I want to unpack in your journey and your book. So let's start turning the pages. I start all my interviews with the essential mom question. How many kids do you have, and where are you raising them?
I have 3 kids. I have 2 girls and a boy. Age range from 14 to 5. And we are in Lexington, Kentucky, where there is lots of horses, horse races, and there's plentiful bourbon. That's what everyone says, and that's what my dad would say as well. So that's where we are, and I've been here my entire life.
That's so nice. I've actually been there. It's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful city.
It is beautiful.
So admittedly, your stay-at-home mom journey is a little backwards, right? You went from right when you had your first 2 kids, you went back to work. But then when you had your third, something changed. So what was that, and why was it important to be home with your kids?
Okay, so my husband has always been the breadwinner of our household. Dustin and I, my husband, have been together since I was 14. So my entire life, we essentially grew up together. But he's always made more money. So when I always said I could never be a stay-at-home mom. It took a special person to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was not in the future for me as I thought. So we had my first child, I went back to work, and then my second one, I went back to work, and it was a bit different experience going back because when you have 1 kid, it's hard, but when you have 2 kids, it's harder. So then with my third, obviously pricing of daycare is insane.
Right.
And they weren't at the age where they could come home after school by themselves yet. So we were paying for after school care for one of them, full daycare for the other one. And then it was almost like I was working for them to go to daycare, which I know a lot of women experience when they have children.
Right.
So we decided with the third one that it would make more sense for me to stay home financially.
Understood. And I get that. I totally get that. So let's talk about what you thought being a stay-at-home mom would be like and what it was really like.
Yeah. So I knew it was going to be challenging because I'm not the most patient person in general. And I'm also not neurotypical. I have ADHD and OCD, and that comes with its own problems as far as day-to-day life goes. So I assumed it would be challenging, and I assumed that I would be taking on a lot of roles as far as the household goes, because once you're home more, it's just kind of, that's my job now. And so I kind of knew all that getting into it. What I didn't know is the mental load
Mhm.
that comes with being a stay-at-home mom. And I don't feel like a lot of people, or a stay-at-home parent rather, that a lot of people understand that it's not the physical and part that's demanding that's so much work, quote unquote. It's the mental load for me
Right.
in particular, because I already have some mental challenges as far as just going from A to B is a little bit different for me than it might be for someone else.
Mhm.
So my hardest part of this transition from working mom to stay-at-home mom was the mental load of it all.
And it's a lot. I mean, I think you're very forthright and open about the fact that you are ADD and OCD. And I love what you wrote in the book. You wrote equals WTF, which I
Because nobody knows what to do with it.
right. But you talk about so many things that any mom is going through, but now it's compounded because of how you you see the world and how you interact with the world from an internal perspective. Um, so, and you talk about that a lot in your book, and we're going to delve into that as well. So let's go to your book, because in the book you reveal so much. So share with my listeners the premise of your book and what inspired you to write it, and how did you come up with that awesome title?
Okay, so my life with everyone else's kind of went into panic mode during 2020, because one of my hyper focused issues in my life is medical stuff.
Mhm.
Anything that has to do with um, being ill or people being sick, loved ones that I have
Mhm.
being sick and whatnot. Um, they normal, I want to say, I don't always say that, but the way my husband, I like to compare it to my husband because he is
Mhm.
very, has very atypical personality. So the way that his brain works, or a neurotypical person, is that you see a problem, you address it, you go for it, and you solve it. For me, in the medical world, anything that has to do with medicine, I spiral. I cannot
Mhm.
control my emotions or where my brain goes. And I know a lot of people have that issue, but for whatever reason, since I was a child, my mom says I'm hyper focused and I automatically go to a dark place. So when the
Mhm.
pandemic hit, um,
That had been just, it was a
and
nightmare, but even
and
more compounded for
and
you. Yeah.
everyone, like normally in that instance, I can go to my mom because my mom is a nurse, my mother-in-law's a nurse, my sister-in-law's a nurse. I can go to them and they can talk me off my ledge when I have an issue. But during the pandemic, nobody knew what to do.
Right.
Nobody knew what to expect. There was no one I could turn to talk me off my ledge, so to speak. So that made it amplified my anxiety with medical stuff so much more. Like I go to
Mhm.
my mom and that's who I go to for jokes. And I go to my dad for someone like that's going to talk me off my ledge. So my mom was kind of like, well, nobody knows what to do. What you find something that you can do with that time to make yourself laugh. You like to laugh, do this. And my dad's like, you just got to hope and pray for the best and go, do something that's going to make your mind at ease. So I
Mhm.
was like, well, I can't do it all, but I can write down those things and kind of mix it in. I'm going to write my feelings, but I'm also going to make myself and my people on Instagram laugh because everyone needs to laugh right now. And I was focusing
Absolutely. Yeah.
that energy and that uncertainty uh, into something better, which to me occupied my mind and my
Mhm.
time. Because my kids, I know that all cities and towns and stuff weren't like this, but my kids were out of school for the entire year of 2021, essentially.
Really? Oh my God, that had to have been,
So
and you had little ones. I cannot
yeah,
even imagine. Because,
yeah.
yeah.
So in June of 2020, I started dabbling in blogging and made my page on Instagram public, because I had a couple of friends that were like, you got to let people know what you're saying because what you're saying is valuable. Um, and I was like, me, I've always loved writing, but I never thought I was good at it, because
Right.
self doubt is a real thing with especially women. And so I started reposting that stuff on my Instagram page from my blog. And once I
And you
did
caught
that, it
fire.
was like I had so many people
Yeah.
say, yes. Ever so many people were like, you need to write all this down into a book. And I'm like, I can't write a book. And then my husband was like, oh yeah. And that was all I needed, because it was him saying, you can start a lot of things, but finishing them is hard for you, basically. And so I was like, okay, well, I am going to write a book then. And so I ordered my MacBook that night and I started writing, and I literally never stopped. And it was like a fire had been lit under me, and it ignited something I didn't know was there. And I had been having some issues with saying no for my entire life. And I never realized that that was adding to all of the anxiety that I was having, because you can say yes to things you want to say yes to, but then when you start saying yes to things that maybe you don't want to say yes to, but you don't want to hurt anyone else, then you lose yourself in that yes, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I used to love the show American Idol, and
I did
Randy
too.
used to always say,
Yeah.
he always used to say, it's a no for me, dog. And my mom was like, you just got to start saying it. And I was like, I actually feel like that's a great idea. And so I just kind of ran with that. And it made so much sense in the moment, because the more I was saying yes to writing, the less I was saying yes to the things that were causing me anxiety and stress and harm, really,
Mhm.
because there were some relationships that I was in with people that were, from an outside perspective, had been telling me that it was harmful to my mental health for a long time.
Right.
And it was time to start saying no. And I started realizing, like, in 2020, if I'm not, like, the things I thought for so long I didn't want to miss out on,
Mhm.
were the things that I wasn't even missing in 2020, like when I couldn't do those things. So it was like, well, if I can be happier without that stuff, why am I doing it? So I decided it was a no for me for a lot of things and a lot of people. Unfortunately, you have to mourn those things, but then once you do, you get to the other side and it feels so much lighter.
I can totally appreciate that. And I think so, I mean, think about how many moms you know who are people pleasing is so common, right? And think about all the
Oh,
times, and
yes.
I'm totally guilty of this as well, where you say, yeah, you raise your hand and say, yeah, I'll do something. And you're like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And so there is so much power in saying no. And I think at first, did you find that people were like, what do you mean no? What are you talking about? But
Oh,
then,
they instantly took it personally.
right. And it's not. It's all about you, not
Mm-mm.
them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there were several things that I really liked about your book. You were brutally honest, which I love, and you talk about the ADHD plus OCD equals what the. This is a clean podcast, and your book reads like what I'm assuming. And for those on the video cast, here you go. Oh, is that working? Okay. Um, your book reads like what I'm assuming your stream of consciousness sounds like, which makes it a really fun read. Plus, you have the wonderful chapter names. They're pitty and witty, and then you have the many margarita recipes that sound delish. And I'd love to know what inspired the margarita recipes, and have you tried them all?
So I have not tried them all. I have tried quite a few. What inspired it? It's actually quite funny. I have two sister-in-laws. One is actually my neighbor, and the other one lives in Charleston, South Carolina. And we visit her quite often. And I was on the phone with her one night, and she had said, I was like, I need to think of something funny and like fun to put in here. And
Mhm.
she's like, why don't you like put your favorite drink recipe in there? Just like saying like one drink, at the beginning, because that at the beginning of the book or at the end of the book, I think is what she said. She's like, just put your favorite drink recipe in there. And then it's kind of like you can all come together and have a drink together, like the same drink or whatnot.
Right.
And I was like, my favorite drink? Well, I just don't have one. So then I was like, my favorite is a margarita, but like, what about, and I talked to her, kind of out loud about this. And I said, what about if I did each chapter, because then you can kind of, if you have my brain, you kind of need to set the book down and walk away and come back
Mhm.
when you're reading things, because you get so interrupted by everyone and everything. And I was like, what about if it's kind of like on Tuesday nights, I'm going to read a chapter and make the drink of this chapter. So I made the decision to come up with drinks or margarita recipes that coincided kind of the titles with what I was talking about.
Right.
Like one I titled, I think it was in the beginning. I'm trying to think of what my favorite one was.
You had one margarita mix that was that was called Unqualified. And the title of that chapter was If You Say Yes to Staying Home, Say No to Losing Yourself, which I thought was really important.
Yeah.
And then the margarita name is Unqualified. So I love how you weave
Yes. So
that in. Yeah.
I did. And there was one that was the one I talk about in my book about how I had my implants.
Yes.
And then I think that margarita was a honeydew one.
Right.
And I thought it was funny because I kind of like played off of getting new image to also melons, because that's what they call them. So it was a
Right.
honeydew kind of thing. And so
Right.
I just kind of thought that was fun. I had a really, really fun time discovering new recipes and trying new recipes. And actually, the honeydew one was one that I did at my book launch because it was green and the color of my book is green, and I felt like
Mhm.
it was a good one to have. And it was actually fantastic. So I just kind of try to be original with my idea behind the recipes. Um, but she kind of gave me an outlook and I kind of ran with it. And it was so much fun. And plus, I thought women can keep this in their kitchen. And it's a pretty book. I did a really lot of thinking to make the book at least look like a coffee table book.
Mhm.
So if you put it in out and it's okay, I have mine in my kitchen and I can just grab it and it's right there to make a drink. And so I felt
Right.
like that was fun to do with that. So it was really something different and unique that just kind of came about in a conversation with my sister who I love so much.
Right. It's really fabulous. And you talk about so many things, and we're going to get into that. I wanted to ask you, are there any chapters that were particularly easy to write and particularly difficult to write?
Um, I think the chapters talking about my relationship with my husband were quite easy because we have a very easy relationship as far as we know each other's ins and outs.
Mhm.
We're very forward. We're very open and honest about our relationship. All the things in front and behind closed doors. It's just kind of very open. We've never been um, private, really. I mean, I'm just
Mhm.
not a private person. So that was quite easy to talk about and fun to talk about. The harder topics were when I involved my children because it was very hard for me. I have several things that I had removed from the book because it just didn't feel right to put in there when they don't. I always let them know what I was talking about before I wrote about it in
Mhm.
there because that's very important for me and for them. And my middle child is very private. Um, so I wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable with it. So being able to be open and honest about things and still protecting their privacy and
Mhm.
their well-being and save them from some embarrassment or whatnot that might be
Yeah.
later when they read it. So that was probably the harder part for me, kind of figuring out the balance there.
And you know what? Having read the whole book, you did a wonderful job at that, because I can appreciate at their ages really wanting to protect their privacy, like you just said, and you understand who they are and their personalities, but it doesn't go any deeper than that. And I thought that's a really wise choice. And I thought you did a really
Thank
terrific
you.
job at that.
Thank
So
you.
let's talk about the struggles and insecurities that you dealt with, right, around pouring your life into this book. How did you move past them? Was that sort of easy? Were you just able to like put it on the page and have that
So
release?
I talk a lot. So I
That's what's wonderful
decided
about you. Yeah.
I was going to write exactly the way I spoke. And that kind of, at that, when I made my decision to do that, then it made things a lot easier. I never honestly, I'm not a super secure person. Like I said, I'm not a private person. I'll tell you whatever. I have a lot of insecurities, just like other people do,
Sure.
especially women, I feel. But I did not even get one. I don't even think I really got insecure until the night before it was going to publish.
Mm.
And then it like hit me, oh my God, what if no one buys my book? That is embarrassing, because I've done all this work and I've poured all this stuff into it. And um, my husband was like, but you did it. So that part
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And I just, it was
You
just a
finished
whole
it.
like,
Yeah.
yes, it was a whole
Huge.
12 hours of just minute by minute, just feeling like, oh my gosh, should I do this? If once I hit publish, it's published and there's nothing I can do.
Mhm.
Um, so really, I didn't have a lot of insecurities because I didn't try to have any type of writing that was outside of my comfortability, or I didn't
Mhm.
try to write anything that was very hard to read, or I didn't use words that I wasn't familiar with. So I didn't feel like any of that was going to be a problem. I, I was nervous, like I said, about my kids and what they would think. And honestly, I didn't even think about who was going to read it until I went to, I published it in September, and in August they had, or I'm sorry, in October, at the beginning of October, they had a thing at my daughter's school that was a fall festival.
Mhm.
And one of her teachers said, I just read your book and I love it. And I stopped right then and I was like, oh my God, their teachers are reading my book. And then it kind of hit me like,
That,
oh
huh?
my God, everyone knows my secrets. And it never even occurred to me that people like
Right.
that. So that was it. And I had a lot of confidence behind it because I had a lot of support. My mom read every single word, um, every single, I mean, and she's my biggest cheerleader. So she gave me a lot of
Right.
confidence, and that's not super hard to do when you have people in your corner that are willing to pump you up, if you will.
Absolutely. And I will point out that the book has been a great success, and it's an easy, it's sort of like a conversational read. So it's a wonderfully easy, fun. I totally laughed out loud, in doing so. And so now we're going to get into a couple of things that I wanted to highlight and ask you specifically about. But I just want to give you a moment and say congratulations on a book well done. And I know that was huge for you.
Thank you so much. And I love it when people say laugh out loud, because that's my love language, is like sarcasm and making people laugh. So it just
Yeah.
makes me like giddy. I'm so excited when people say that.
It was that kind of book. So your girls' trip to Mexico, which happened around Hurricane Ida, which was hilarious just in the setup. But let's talk about the importance of girls' trips, because it's such a different trip when you go with another couple or your spouse. And I don't know about you, but when I go on my girls' trips, we solve marital issues, kid issues, world issues. And there is no pressure, right? Because you're with your lifelong friends, with women that you really know. So talk about why that is so
I just
essential
got
and important to you.
goosebumps with you. I just got goosebumps with you saying that, because my best friend and I just booked a trip that we're going to be taking soon together. And us two have never taken a trip together. So it is very
Nice.
important. So I did, before my husband and I decided to have children, I had someone that told me, it doesn't matter what else you do, but
Mhm.
before, when you have children, still go on your dates, still do your things, still keep the person that you are, um, right there close. So I knew that it was going to be important for me to still date my spouse, but I didn't realize it was still important for me to still date my friends.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that that was going to be challenging. I was the first of my friends to have kids. Um, so we were in different places in life for sure. But I had a couple of friends that have just loved babies and kids since they were babies and kids themselves.
Mhm.
So I didn't have the support as far as like me too with my friends, because they didn't have kids yet.
Right.
But I had the support of, I'll go too. Let's do this. If you want to go get coffee, let's go get coffee. Leave the kid at home with the babysitter. Like, and so they essentially became my like second hands, because my husband worked so much. And these friends in particular that I went on the trip with were also my babysitters. They would come and they watch my kids, and I've been friends with them my entire life. And so it felt very like they were an extension of me when they had them.
Mhm.
And then I was like, but I just need to get out of here. Like, I need to do something because I'm losing who I am. Um, And one of my friends was like, let's do something, like have your mom help with the kids. And I'm like, my mom, she has a dad. No, it's not going to just be my mom.
Like, wait, they have
Um,
a dad.
that's like the
Yeah.
mentality that we've had since the beginning of time. And so I'm like, no, they have a dad, like he can handle it. And she's like, all right, cool. And I'm like, let's go to Mexico, like why not, let's do it. And because you see the movies where they do, friends go to do all this stuff, and it's always a comedy. And she was like, well, okay, well, I was thinking more like Nashville, or like the Hilton downtown
Oh,
for a
closer
night.
in. Yeah.
But her and her sister, who is also a good friend of mine, they work for the airlines, and they were like, "We don't have. If you want to do that, like we can make it happen." And I'm like, because we didn't have any money, we just didn't. I mean, in the beginning, when you're of your
Yeah.
marriage and you first have kids, you just don't have it. So it just happened to be that I had good friends that worked for an airline, and they had points towards hotels, and it just
That's
worked out and
great.
aligned perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did not look at the weather, but we went to
Clearly.
Mexico. Yeah. And it happened. And it was like, my husband's like, the night before, so you're really going to just leave us? And I was like, yeah, I am. And I think you can do it. But if I don't go right now, you're not going to know how to do it on your own, because she's
Right.
still little and you need to know how to do it without me here. And I'm not a control freak by any means. I'm just not, it's not in my nature. I have never been that way. Um, but I realized when I had her that I was starting to like become a little bit more like that. I was becoming like, you can't do it right, so I'm gonna do it type thing. But then I
Right. Oh,
realized,
yeah. It's a,
if he doesn't swim, he's gonna sink. So he has to do it on his own. So I never really had an issue with letting him parent, but I knew that I could do it on my own. He needed to do it on his own. So it wasn't that hard of a decision for me just to be like, all right, I'm out.
I'm gonna
And
go.
so yeah, she
Yeah.
was 4 months old, and which seems really super young. I was breastfeeding, um, like full time breastfeeding and pumping. So I was like, well, that's why they make pumps, and we'll make it work. And fortunately for me, I know it's not for all parents or all moms, but I was a mega maker of milk, and I had plenty in the freezer, and we made it work, and it was fantastic. But yes, there was
And
a
you got
hurricane.
away. And there was a hurricane. So they're gonna,
In more ways than once.
they're gonna
Yeah.
have to read the book to hear more about that, because it was hilarious.
Yeah.
But you said something that really resonates with me, and that is, why is it that moms have to move mountains to go away? Um, to do things without the kids, even when you have, as you said, a full-time live-in father. And I recall hours spending writing up lists of who goes where, school activity, other moms that were going to be helping out. And by the time I got to the airport, for this getaway with my husband, I was coming down with a cold. So it so resonated with me. Dads pack and moms go through all this stuff just to get there.
Since day one, my husband has been very never really had a problem with being hands on. He is not a mom by any means,
Right.
but like he never said like watching the kids or babysitting. I would have friends, and their husbands or their partners would say like, well, I've got to watch the kids tonight. And it like blew my mind to say, watch the kids tonight, because you're
Right.
not watching, you're just going to parent like you should be doing every day.
Exactly. Exactly.
But at the end of the day, he couldn't go pick up a pair of shoes for my kids. He doesn't even know what size they wear. Um, and that's a lot of, because I think it's just ingrained in our nature. But yes, I went out of town a couple weeks ago. Speaking of moving mountains, I went out of town and I left, and I didn't really have to do much for him, as far as he could kind of figure it out and maneuver. And I just wrote down kind of when their games were. That's about it with him. And I was there. I was on a girls trip. I do it every year with the women in my husband's family, and it was hilarious because that morning, a Saturday morning, every single mom that was there had the dad call or text and ask where their uniform was. Every single one of us, because the sports that they played,
Isn't that
the
crazy?
dads
Yeah.
had zero idea of where they were.
Yeah. That's
So
just
that was
crazy to
just,
me.
we all laughed. We laughed so hard because we were like, oh my, it was like almost on a 5-minute increments, our phones would ring. And then the following week, my husband and I went back to Charleston, and I made a spreadsheet of stuff for my mom and his mom to be able to communicate better. And I showed it to him, and he was like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "How else are they going to know?" And he didn't have an answer because they weren't going to know unless I told them, because he didn't
Right.
know.
Right.
And
I can appreciate that.
I feel like women take the rein on it just naturally.
Mhm.
And they could have figured it out, of course. They could have fumbled
Yeah.
around and figured it out or texted me, but I'm like, I don't want to
Right.
be texted every 20 minutes for something. So I moved the mountains and made it happen. And it was probably one of the best easy trips my husband and I have ever taken.
Which is so nice. So in your
Mhm.
chapter, A Hug or a Headlock, you talk about relationships that had some really insight, and I think you had some really insightful thoughts. And I've been married for over 30 years, and I think you are really spot on. So let's talk about a few of these. I
Sure.
know you, I'll just shoot out one and then you can take it from there. RESPECT.
That is one thing that we have learned over time. That's not something that we really went into because we were just kids, when we started dating. And and that seems to be that we've learned, if you don't respect what I'm saying, then there's no communication
Right.
there. If you don't respect the space I need, then there's no grace given. And it kind of can snowball. If you don't respect my boundaries with your friends or your work or whatever, then at what point does it become too much? And now we've gotten to a place in our relationship where we don't really know each other anymore. Because if we don't communicate, we can't we don't know what's going on in each other's
Right.
lives. If we don't give each other grace, then we stay bitter. If we don't set boundaries, then we cross them and we get angry. And so it's just one of those things that we every day, it's something new that we work on and try to learn. But respect at the end of the day is the most important valuable thing in any relationship, not just marriage, friendships. And it's so hard for me to try to make my husband understand this with our children, because if there's no mutual respect with our children, then they're not going to listen to us. What we say has no weight. And I know that kids still have to be guided, but we can demand them to respect us all day long, but for them
It's a
actually
two-way
to
street.
respect
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
it's completely different. So with my husband and I, we learned, fairly quickly that if we don't respect each other, we don't have any ground to stand on. And then if your foundation is rocky, how long does it stand? So
That's
that
true.
kind
That's
of
true.
is the beginning of it for us.
And it's a learning process over the years. It's a huge learning
Mm.
process. So let's talk a little about mom skills and superpowers. What skills have you honed over the years as a mom, and how did you bring those skills into raising your kids and writing your book?
Giving myself grace and patience. Patience is,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, is not my strongest point. I am very passive in a lot of ways. And my dad, I get that from my dad, because it's kind of like he has it is what it is. It's just a car. It's just inconvenience.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and it's kind of, I feel like that I learned that a lot of that from him, to give myself grace. And so when I was writing my book and I would write something and I'm like, I'm not saying it right. I'm not, give yourself grace and move on to the next thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
it'll come to you, type thing. And with my kids, it's the same thing. Like this morning, I cried on my Instagram almost this morning, and I'm not a crier in front of a camera, but I held it back. But this morning was very difficult with one of my children. um and so my oldest was like, that's not fair that you just stayed so calm through all that,
Right.
and you didn't match their energy, because
Mm.
now it looks like you just allowed them to disrespect you. And I had to explain to her, if I don't give her grace, then I can't expect her to give me grace when I have those moments. Um, and I know that we all need that grace. And so in writing my book, I just did that, and I implemented. That was one of the main things I implemented with myself. Is if I'm too hard on myself, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. And another thing that I also learned is, I've always thought sarcasm is my thing, but I've learned with my kids, like if I can make a joke about something that they're upset about, as far as not making it seem like it's not minimizing it, but making it be like, oh, I do that too. Yesterday I did this and whatnot. Then they kind of feel, I can see their shoulders relax. Like, oh, okay, well, it wasn't that big of a deal that I was embarrassed in the lunchroom because I dropped my tray or whatnot,
Right.
because mom did this yesterday, and it kind of lightened it a little bit. And I feel like when I was writing, if I felt like I was stuck in something, I moved on to something that was funny or lighthearted that I could go to, that would make me feel like, okay, that part wasn't as heavy as I thought it was. So that kind of mentality, and it's hard. Every single day it's a new struggle, but I still try to implement that with them, in that way.
And I think those are beautiful. And the other thing that I'm really getting from you is that you're a communicator. You have evolved into a communicator. And that's another huge mom skill, along with things like negotiator, right? Sounds like you had to negotiate something with your daughter just this morning. And I think those are huge. And so it's clear, right, that you have created these skills, and then you have been able to parlay them into your ability to write this fabulous book.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm still a mess, and I know a
Aren't we
lot
all?
of, oh, yeah, a lot of your guests that you have on here are past the phases that I am on, as far as like I still have a 5-year-old at home. I
Right.
still have kids at home. I'm still a stay-at-home parent, although my husband and I are, obviously I'm writing. I'm still writing. I'm working on my second book, but also my husband and I have started a company outside of that. And so
Mhm.
I'm helping him with navigating that. And so I'm still in the midst of the storm,
Mhm.
but because my age gap is so big between my second and my third, I feel like I kind of got to raise them a little bit differently. And the last one has kind of made me feel like, um, he just had to fit into where we were. And so it's made things a little less chaotic than it felt so chaotic when they were all so little.
Right.
So I don't have it all together by any means, but I am good at communicating my feelings, because I know that if there's no communication there, there's nowhere to walk. I feel like communication is the road to the next path, and we can't get there very easily without that road. So why make
I
it
agree
harder?
with
So
that.
I
Yeah.
do communicate. It's very, just say it. I always say that. Just say it. It's
Just
it's
say it.
it's
Just say
much
it. And I
better.
agree with that. And I wanted to talk about briefly the fact that yes, you are definitely a little younger than some of the other amazing moms that I have interviewed. But what I really liked about your story, Makensi, is that your journey has been different. And then you have started earlier on, right, with your writing and with the book. And I think that's incredibly valuable to stay-at-home moms, because listeners are a little older, they could be a little younger. And I think your story is incredibly valuable, which is why I really wanted to
I
share it.
have a friend that wrote a book called More Than Just a Mom,
Mhm.
and that she did before her kids were older. And when you get older, you learn how valuable that time is, and that is why I think that I said, I can't wait to start living my life, because my parents went to Greece. That was it. And my mom was like, I wish I would have done this 10 years before, because there's no elevators there. You have to walk up this every stone path by yourself. And
Yeah.
that's hard to do when you're older, and don't wait. And so I think that is why I kind of started this journey before a lot of stay-at-home moms do. Um, I'm not great at juggling things, so I challenged myself to that. So that is a lot of the reason why I started writing my book long before probably I had envisioned myself doing so.
Mhm. But you know what? Good for you. You took a chance, you took a step, and it worked out incredibly well. And I applaud you for that. So yay, Makensi. Yay, Makensi.
Thank you.
We are going to be coming, excuse me, a little closer to the end of our time together. I feel like I could talk to you all day. But I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my amazing mom guests. And that is, since this is the Mom to More podcast, Makensi Gage, what is your more?
You said it. It's communication. I have more to give, because I can talk about the things that other people might not feel comfortable talking about, and let them know that it's okay. It's okay that we're all struggling with the same things in different ways. And at the end of the day, communicating that with whomever is going to help you more than it helps them sometimes, but sometimes you're helping them. So communication is my more. I feel like I can communicate and chat and talk and listen all day long. That's what I have to give. And my book, I feel like, let me put that all onto paper and in anybody's home that wants to have it so they can readily availably grab what I've said and think, okay, me too. Let me go back and read that and remember that it's important for me to take that trip. It's important for
And
me
you're
to
also
respect my husband.
absolutely. And you're also doing, with the book, right? You have another book coming, inside of you that you're working on. And so you've parlayed that communication skill into, a very funny book. It's a no for me. And then, and then your future writing. So I look forward to seeing what you write in the future, because I know it's going to be equally entertaining and insightful and wonderful. So I really look forward to that.
I hope so.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
So.
Well, you'll come back when your second book is written. How about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a few chapters in. It's a little bit harder now, but after you say a lot. But thank you so much for having me today.
Welcome.
And my more is definitely my book and writing. So
I love that. I love that. Well, Makensi, this has been so much fun. And like I said before, I feel like I could talk to you all day. I'd like to know, please tell my listeners, where can people find you online?
Okay, so I have my book is on Amazon. I have the Kindle version as well. I don't have the audio book out yet, but that is something that is in my, before the end of the year. I'm going to be starting that. So I feel like an audiobook is great because I love podcasts. So I listen to things constantly, and I really want to have that as an option as well. But right now it's paperback, hardcover, and Kindle, and you can get it on Amazon.
And on social media, because you are pretty huge on social media. Yes. Where do people find you there? These will all be in the show notes, folks. So
I'm that's so funny. It's weird to me sometimes that I'm on Instagram, and it's at Makensi Gage, MakensiGage. And I don't have anyone running my account. I answer every DM, every message by myself, and I'd love to chat, and would love it if you DM me and just reach out and we can laugh. I can send you a margarita recipe, whatever you'd like.
I would love that. I know our listeners would love that. And again, all the information will be in the show notes so they could find you. And your work is wonderful on Instagram. So proud of you for this book. So I look forward to when the next one is done and we can have you back. Hey, moms, thanks for your 5-star reviews. And here's another one. This is from Trista. What an inspirational and motivating half hour I just spent with the warm, witty, and gracious Sharon Macey and her fascinating guest. The show is truly a gift for all moms who are ready to reinvent themselves. I can't wait for more. Before I sign off, a quick favor. I would love it if you would take a few moments to follow or subscribe to the pod. Following us means you'll never miss an episode, and it really does help the show to grow. Just go to the Mom to More show page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen in. Tap the plus sign in the upper right corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to leave a 5-star rating and review and share an episode with another mom, I'd be so grateful and appreciate your support. Thanks for listening in, and see you next time.